What an awesome guest we have on today. This gentleman is an author, video game writer, screenwriter, narrative designer. I want to welcome on Haris Orkin. Thanks for being on with us.
Well, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Well, I mean, I'm just kind of blown away. Like I don't even know how to start. So, you just have an incredible line of work you've done. You've got, The Division, Mafia 3, Red Alert, Dead Island. Like video games are incredible. You're a screenwriter. You had a film come out that was done by Disney. I mean, you have just been doing it, but I want to talk to you today about your James Bond parody series of books, James Flint. Sounds incredibly interesting. I was wondering if you could just kind of
Oh,
walk
sure.
us through that.
Yeah. The original idea actually I started as a screenplay that I had written years
Really?
ago. Yeah, years ago, and I had gotten a lot of interest, and it got me a lot of assignments. Actually, I ended up writing an animated film for Disney. Which never got made. But
Really?
from that
Wow.
from that screenplay, but it never an option never went anywhere. Didn't get made, and I love the character and the idea. So I decided to write it as a novel, and uh, and it took me a long time because I was a screenplay writer and I was a playwright, and writing prose was is a very different thing. But I kind of worked with people and learned how to do it, and the first book did pretty well, and then I've written other sequels since, and the fourth book just came out about 2 months ago, and so I'll give you a capsule description of what it is. Basically, it's an updated version of Don Quixote, which is what I wanted to do. That was the impetus for the screenplay, and I was trying to think it's going to be set modern day. Who would someone be if he was Don Quixote today? Would he be like a Marvel superhero? And because I grew up in this, I was like a kid in the '60s, like little kid, and I was really into the whole super spy James Bond and Man from
Yeah.
Uncle and all that. That I decided to base it on someone who kind of saw all those things themselves and decided to take on this persona. And so the main character is actually a patient in a mental hospital in Pasadena who was this foster kid and bullied and kind of this fat little kid who just felt he had no power, and he ended up developing a delusion, becoming the most powerful person he could imagine, which was basically James Bond. So he modeled himself on James Bond. He watched Bruce Lee movies to teach himself kung fu, and
Like
he
judo
just
chops.
yeah, he like read all these things and learned all these things, and he just was he was so delusional and convinced himself so thoroughly, and he grew up and he got in great shape and grew into this like handsome man who like women kind of fell over,
Right.
and so in the first book, the the hospital is taken over by a new HMO, and he thinks that the enemy has infiltrated the hospital, and
Oh my God.
and he
That
thinks the
is
hospital
incredible.
he thinks the hospital is the headquarters for Her Majesty's Secret Service, and that the psychiatrist is M. And when a new HMO takes it over and people get let go, some of the patients leave. He thinks they've been kidnapped, and he ends up carjacking an orderly who he's been friendly with, a guy named Sancho, from the Don Quixote, and they go on an adventure to find out what happened to everyone. Even though Flynn is completely delusional about it, and they end up stumbling into a real life kind of supervillain because he seems so, everyone just who looks at him thinks he must be a secret agent because he just acts like a secret agent.
That's
You know,
incredible.
so that's and I optioned the series just last year right before the writers guild
Oh,
strike, which
congratulations.
thankfully is over. Looks like it's over.
Yeah.
To Avalon Entertainment, which is a company based out of the UK, but they're also in the US, and
Hmm.
so hopefully that will get done at some point. So that now
I
they can
I
start
love
sending it
this
out again.
concept. I know I love this concept. Like I can see it. You're pitching it to
Mm,
me. I can see it. It
mm.
sounds hilarious. I've preached before, take the classics and put a new twist on them and watch what happens, because usually you can get heat behind that. And so a Don Quixote James Bond is such an incredible hybrid. I love this. It sounds hilarious. Um, and I can see why it's built up such a following in your 4 books into your series. Um, when you're writing comedy as a book, see, like when I write comedy as a screenwriter, I always have like a partner I can bounce off of. Is there a difficulty there, or do you find yourself kind of like soft pitching comedic beats to people to kind of suss it out, or do you just have like a natural, like it's funny and you just keep hitting it?
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing it for writing. I mean, when I wrote screenplays full time, I wrote comedy screenplays. Hollywood tends to pigeonhole you, and that was
Yeah,
my,
of course.
and so I love writing comedy. Honestly, that was my, so I was fine with that. Though writing games, it's been great because I've been able to write in all these different genres. But I don't. I usually write on my own. I've written a couple things with partners, but and I do drive my wife and my friends, my sons crazy by telling him, but I try not to give too much away because I want them to read the
Right.
book and
Right.
then come at it a little fresh. But I will sometimes I can't help myself and I'll suggest comic beats. But writing comedy in novels is definitely I it made it difficult to get it published for a while. I think because that's not a big genre, comic novels.
Yeah.
And there's like Carl Hyacin is probably the closest in a way to. But no, I just do it on my own, and I feel confident, and I'm confident enough now that if something's funny to me, it'll be funny to other people. So
I like that. Well, what are the, I mean, since you have such a broad skill set, what are the, I mean, obviously I know the difference between writing a stage play, writing a screenplay, writing for television. I get that. But walk me through at least your differences, or maybe some growing pains you had to experience from writing, from being a screenwriter to writing video games, which is a whole different medium, to writing novels.
yeah, the basis of all of those is similar. It's great characters and conflict and and you use the basic building blocks in all those mediums. It's just how you communicate the story is different, very different in them. Novels, you can be inside the character's head, which is like such a great thing. And for the Flynn novels, that's really essential because since Flynn is delusional, you want to you want to find out what's going on inside his head, but then I also go to other characters, so you see everyone has their own point of view on things, and so you can, and honestly all the characters in their own way, like everyone is in life, is delusional, right? Everyone is
Right,
in their own
sure.
delusional bubble to some extent.
Of
You can
course.
see it in our politics now, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's people just seem delusional, and
Everybody's bubbled. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
so
everybody's
yeah,
in a
so
bubble. I got it.
yeah, so you can do that with with a book, but like in a screenplay or a stage play, it has to be explicit with the dialogue more so, right? But like movies still have like a point of view. Usually it's from, sometimes there's a couple characters, but so you have to kind of take that in mind. And with games, you have to keep in mind the fact that it's the player has to have some control over the story. Sometimes it's an illusion of control. They
Okay.
have like branches, things they can do, but a lot of times it's the writer still has to kind of create the guidelines and the boundaries. So some games that are open world will have like branching storylines, and that those are more complicated. And those are almost written like TV seasons with lots of writers, and others are more linear, and those are more akin to like a movie. But even within those, you want to give the players some agency so they feel like they have some control over the story. So it's, and honestly, it was just working within each of these mediums where I learned how to do it. Um, Now games are very different, even amongst themselves. There's all these different genres of games, and each of
Yeah.
them have their own kind of rules and guidelines you have to kind of figure out as you go. The part of what was fun about writing games is no one really knew how to do it yet. When I started doing this, there weren't many really great narratives in games. It
Yeah.
was just burgeoning. It was like 2005. Now I don't know if you played The Last of Us, and they made an HBO
Yeah.
show. That was
Yeah.
like such a brilliant story in that game, and the characters were so like fleshed out and full. It really, you can tell just as good a story now in video games as you can in any other medium. So
Yeah, I've come a long way since Doom, you know.
yeah, yeah.
You're
But
on
those are
Mars.
fun.
There's
Yeah,
demons. Go. Yeah.
yeah. Blow them up. It's those are fun though too, right? Sometimes you
Yeah.
just want to blow the crap out of demons. So
Yeah, that's true. I will tell my wife, what are you doing tonight? I'm shooting aliens tonight.
yeah.
That's the plan. So well, how about let me ask you a question I don't think it really gets addressed often, like time investment. So how long does it take you to write, invest into a novel versus writing a screenplay or a video game?
Well, you know, it kind of depends on how much time I have to compared to everything else I'm working on at the same time. A
Yeah.
novel, I can, if I'm just working just on the novel, I can probably finish a first draft of a novel in about 6 months. But
Wow.
for the kind of novels I write, which aren't super long, they're
Yeah.
like 300 pages, and that's a
Yeah,
first draft. That's a
it's
first draft,
fine.
though, and I have to go
Yeah.
back and rewrite. And I'm just doing it on my own. I'm not collaborating with anyone, so I don't have to
Yeah.
like get any feedback. At least initially. Once it goes to my agent editor, then I have a lot of feedback. But
Yeah. I got an
so
editor too. I feel you on that.
yeah. But with the games, it's so collaborative, and it's true in movies too. But the games even more so because you're working with an art team and you're working with the programmers and the game designers. And I also cast and direct actors a lot of times for the games.
That is
So
so
there's that
cool.
that's all part of it too. So yeah. So it's a lot of skills, different skills to learn. But I wrote comedy radio before when I was writing plays back early on. And so that I found that writing radio translated well to writing games.
I wondered if that was close.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Well, especially early on, because when the games did not have performance capture and you
Hmm.
couldn't really see expressions on faces, you had to be writing as if you were writing a play, and the audience was like watching from the back of the theater because you couldn't. So the dialogue had to carry a lot of it. Now, because of performance capture, facial mocap,
Yeah.
the actors, you're really just working directly with the actors, and the actors can communicate a lot with just their expression on their faces. So yeah.
I actually want to ask you about writing to voice directing because when I'm writing my own scripts and they get optioned and a producer has them, they give me the notes, make the notes, no
Right.
problem. And then it gets into I'm on set and I'm watching the actors make choices. The actors are always surprising me with the choices they make. The director is always surprising me with their interpretation of my words in the scene, so it's always interesting seeing like, wow, that's not how I saw it in my head. And that can be a good thing. Um, so uh, you were writing the words, you're the screenwriter, and you're going and becoming the voice director. So I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you already know how you want this performed. And so that now you have like a direct link to the actor and you can kind of have them match what your vision is. Do you find that is that accurate?
So yeah, somewhat. I mean, to me, I tell my game clients that I do like to be involved with the casting and the direction because I feel like that's just another part of the writing. That's like the finished part. Because otherwise, if someone else is doing it, they may take it off or not in another direction that doesn't
Yeah.
work as well, or not quite understand what I was trying to get across. Sometimes, if a character is being sarcastic or if there's subtext that they're not understanding,
Right.
then I can have the actor communicate. But also, the actors always surprise me with how they approach the role, and they'll usually do things that are much better than I had in mind. So I'm not too slavish about them doing what I had in my mind because usually they improve it. And if
Yeah.
as long as they're improving it, I'm glad. I'm grateful for that. And also, if you give them some leeway to do it to kind of make it their own, it'll feel much more fresh. It'll feel much more alive, in the moment. So
That was
yeah,
my question, because I can
yeah,
see you can have a lot of control over the creative process there.
yeah,
And so eventually you can get like, no, this is how I saw it. But I wanted to know, like, can that actor have that opportunity of giving their own choice and surprising you and seeing, does that kind of reflect or change the scene, but in a good way? And it sounds like it does, which is
yeah. I mean,
awesome.
I like that. I like to work with actors who are good at improvising too. Especially if I'm working on games with humor in them, because a lot of times they'll just come up with stuff that I didn't.
Yeah.
It'll just add a lot to it. So I'm not too precious about. I
Yeah.
can be precious with the novel because it'll be just as I wrote it. But with dialogue and stuff like that, I'm fine with the actors bringing their own creativity to it.
No, I think you're right. I think with the
Yeah,
comedy genre, outside of really any other genre, I found that comedy can be a bit more fluid.
yeah,
It can move around. You can find those comedic bits when you're even on set and it wasn't written
yeah.
yet. You can have the improv. It's hard to do that with horror.
No, yeah,
So, that has to be
yeah. It
very
is.
set up, very structured. It's hard to play around with that. So I think that is really cool. Um, I know when I've been on set, and like I said, I've seen directors have really cool interpretation of my words, and I've seen actors do really cool choices where I go, "Oh wow, that's pretty awesome." It is nice to be surprised, but you have to be able to have that personality of like giving up a bit of that control. Because if you're too since we've already mentioned politics, if you're too authoritarian in the matter, it's not
Yeah.
going to come out maybe in the best way that it could have.
No,
Um,
you end up, especially if you're like directing actors, they just get shut down. They just feel like they can't really express themselves, and you just feel it immediately in the performance. So
so I've seen that, you know, in person. Does that happen with voice actors too? Like, do
oh
they feel
yeah,
like they're too, and they just kind of shut down and they can't perform? Oh, that's
yeah.
fascinating.
So you have to kind of, yeah. I always try to keep things really loose, and I cast a lot of
Yeah.
people I've worked with before who I know can do it. But I've been in sessions where there's someone else there, like someone from like a game studio, and I worked a lot in advertising. Who's someone from like the agency or the client who is just like they're just like glaring at the actors through the glass because they're not delivering, the way they think they should. And I can just see the actors like, because it's hard. You're
Oh
one of the
man.
you're in a booth, which I've
Yeah.
recorded. I've done that before, and you'll see all these people staring at you, and if some of them are like glaring at you, it's like Jesus.
Oh my gosh. That reminds me, I don't know if you've ever seen the comedy bit of the guy who's trying to do an ad and they're like, "We need you to sound like a lion."
Yep.
Like you're
Yep.
being like that comedy bit. And so then he
Yeah.
ends it by literally impersonating being killed by a lion. And so I can get that. I want to get back to A License to Die, which sounds like a great parody name, a James Flynn escapade.
Yeah.
I'm actually gonna pick. You've inspired me to read it because I'm so
Oh, good.
excited
Yeah.
about how you don't really like the comedy that I like is like a Douglas Adams Hitchhiker's Guide. So like that, and I have this like I have this real interest in seeing where this goes because it sounds absolutely hilarious.